idea for a tool pops up in your head. Something small, something that would fix one specific, mildly annoying problem in your actual life. Maybe it's tracking who owes you money for something. Maybe it's knowing the second your favorite restaurant has a table open. It doesn't matter what it is specifically, but what matters is what happens next. The second it crosses your mind, it gets dismissed. And that's not because the idea is bad. It's because somewhere along the way, a decision got made that you're not the kind of person who builds things like that. Filed under not for me, right next to woodworking and speaking Mandarin, moved on with the day. That decision was correct 5 years ago. It isn't anymore. Most people believe that assumption instantly, without ever actually testing it against anything real. The idea shows up, the belief kicks in right behind it, and the idea just quietly dies, usually within about 4 seconds. Nobody sits down and makes a deliberate decision not to build something. The feeling makes the decision for them before there's ever a real choice on the table. And this isn't a some people problem. This happens to people who run businesses, manages teams, solves hard problems all day for a living. The assumption doesn't care how capable you actually are anywhere else in your life. And to be fair to that feeling, it used to be earned honestly. A working tool used to mean a computer science degree, or hiring a developer, which meant a quote that started somewhere in four figures for something you might use twice a week, or months of nights and weekends teaching yourself to code well enough to make something that actually held together. Tutorial by tutorial, forum post by forum post, most of it spent debugging things you didn't fully understand yet. And that wasn't a confidence problem. That was a wall. A real physical feeling wall between the idea sitting in your head and the actual thing sitting in front of you. The wall was consistent enough that avoiding it entirely was often the smarter move. And that's not a knock on anyone who never learned to code. That's just math. But here's what actually changed. AI can now take a plain description of a problem and turn it into working software. You're not learning a programming language. You're not touching a single line of code, not even by accident. You're describing what's wrong, the same way you'd describe it to a friend over coffee, and something on the other end already knows how to build it. And that's not a minor upgrade to how software gets made. That's a completely different relationship with technology. One where you're the one setting the direction instead of adapting to whatever direction the software already decided for you. And here's the part that surprises people most. That description doesn't need to sound technical to work. It needs to sound real. Something like, I keep losing track of who still owes me for the fantasy football pot, is a complete, usable starting point. So is something like, I want to know the second my kid's lunch account drops below $10 because I always find out 3 days too late. Nobody in the history of actual human speech has ever said, build me a payment tracking application with the following specifications. The messy version, the one that sounds like an actual complaint you'd make out loud, is the better brief every single time. That sentence is the whole brief. There's no code, no spec sheet, no wireframe. Just that one sentence typed exactly the way you'd say it out loud. That's the entire input. Everything technical that happens after you hand it off, all of it, is no longer your problem to solve. You're not expected to know what happens in between. You're expected to know what you actually need. What comes back isn't a generic app hoping to fit your situation well enough if you squint. It's not a workaround bottle. into some other tool that was designed for somebody else's life and never quite fit yours. It's built around your one specific, slightly annoying problem, because that was the only problem it was ever asked to solve in the first place. And that's the whole advantage. Not more features, a tighter fit. So here's the actual shift, and it's smaller than most people expect it to be. You don't need to understand how any of it works under the hood. The same way you don't need to understand combustion to drive somewhere. You just need to know where you're headed. You need to know how to describe where you want to go. That's the entire skill now. And you've had it this whole time. You just never needed it for this before, because there was never anything on the other end capable of listening. And this isn't a trick that happens to work for money tracking and falls apart the second you try it on anything else. A budget built around how you actually spend, not a template that assumes you're a completely different person with completely different habits than the ones you actually have. A tracker for a search only you're running, watching for exactly the things you personally care about, not a generic dashboard of everything. A planner built around one real trip instead of adapted from some stranger's idea of a good itinerary tool that happened to get 5 stars. Even something as small as a shared list for one specific household chore nobody can agree on. They're different problems, but they all have the same plain language starting point every single time. But I'm not a technical person. Neither is almost anyone else typing a sentence like the fantasy football one. Being technical was never the missing skill here. Knowing what you actually want clearly enough to say it out loud, that was always the hard part. And that part hasn't changed one bit. You've been practicing it your entire life, complaining about things, describing what's annoying you, without ever realizing that was the one skill that would eventually matter most. For decades, building something meant exactly three options: learn to code yourself, which took years most people didn't have; pay someone who already had, which took money most people didn't want to spend on an idea they weren't sure about yet; or give up on the idea and let it die quietly. Same as always, filed away with every other someday project. But now there is a fourth option, and it's the only requirement left. Describe your own problem well enough to be understood. That's a bar almost anyone can clear on the first try. And that's not a claim I'm going to leave sitting there unproven. What comes next in this series is real, built tools made exactly this way for problems that look a lot like the ones you actually deal with. A budget dashboard, a meal planner, a trip planner that replaces 10 open browser tabs. Real things built from real plain language requests, shown exactly as they came out, flaws and all. Every one of them starts with a sentence and ends with something that genuinely works. So if there's one thing to walk away with, it's this: you don't need to know how the engine works. You need to know how to describe where you want to go. That's the whole shift. And it's already here, whether or not you've tested it yet. So what does this mean for you? Well, the next time an idea for a tool crosses your mind and that old instinct kicks in to dismiss it before you've even finished the thought, don't let it. Just describe the actual problem out loud or typed exactly the way you'd complain about it to a friend who happened to ask what's bugging you. Write it down if that helps. Say it into your phone if that's easier. The format doesn't matter. Only the honesty of the description does. That messy, specific, slightly annoyed sentence is genuinely the whole first step. Everything after that isn't yours to figure out anymore. Subscribe if you want to see exactly what that looks like, build by build, because that's what we're going to be doing in this series. And if you want to poke around in the meantime, head over to eauclaireai.com for more. Reach out if you'd like to discuss this or any other AI workflows with us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.